Well, now let's talk about one of our top stories, which is about the ongoing New Hampshire primary. First in the entire nation, because what happened in Iowa was a caucus or caucuses, and this is a battle for the Republicans that's now solely against between Nikki Haley and Donald Trump. The Democrats have a different, slightly strange story where Joe Biden's not even on the ballot as far as the New Hampshire primary is concerned. But let's talk about it in detail. Professor Swaran Singh of the School of International Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi joins us. Good evening to you, Professor. What do you make of what's happening in New Hampshire in terms of how determinant could it be in the overall contest for the US presidential race?
I think especially, Gautam, what happened in Iowa in terms of the difference in voting that is reported, that Donald Trump received about 51% of the votes compared to the runner-up, Governor Ron DeSantis at 21% and Nikki Haley at 19%, has kind of created a mood, especially when the runner-up, Governor Ron DeSantis, has withdrawn now from the race, and race basically is between Nikki Haley, who received 19% in Iowa caucuses.
And he's withdrawn in the favor of Donald Trump.
Yes. So though there are the initial sort of polls that various agencies are giving of what is happening in New Hampshire today, saying that the margin between the former President Donald Trump and Nikki Haley is really reducing. And indeed, some of the agencies are saying that if they are looking at opinion polls across party lines, then at least in New Hampshire, the surveys show Nikki Haley is seen as a stronger candidate against Democratic candidate Joe Biden. So I think it's an interesting outcome which is awaited as to what happens in New Hampshire. Historically also, New Hampshire is usually seen as the first sort of place to have primaries and sets the tone, especially for those various funding agencies who want to support a kind of a candidate who shows an early lead over other candidates. In this case, Donald Trump is really appearing to be kind of a possible candidate that Republicans are going to throw up. And depending on how much margin Nikki Haley is able to manage to reduce, then that contest within the GOP could continue for some more primaries. Otherwise, I think this could be very decisive right now as to whatever is the outcome of New Hampshire here. You mentioned about Joe Biden's name not in the primary of New Hampshire when it comes to Republicans.
Democrats.
That is a very interesting twist. That's a very interesting twist, if I can share in 30 seconds. Democrats have decided to reorganize the timetable for how they will hold plenaries. And New Hampshire was not supposed to be one to start with, but New Hampshire has gone ahead and persisted that they will be the first to go ahead even for the Democratic
Yes,
primaries.
it has a law since 1975 that it has to be the first.
Yes, so that is the twist here.
Yeah. Now, New Hampshire, again, if you look at since the 50s, only thrice has the person who won the primaries in New Hampshire has not gone on to get the candidacy for the Republican Party. So New Hampshire is kind of a bellwether state in that regard as well. But let's consider the two possibilities. What happens if Donald Trump wins, and what happens if Nikki Haley wins?
I think definitely the first thing that makes the fundamental difference is that Nikki Haley would become the first woman president of the United States.
No, I'm talking about this primary.
Okay, sorry. That seems to be a little far-fetched possibility, though we believe that there's a large number of moderate and neutral sort of Republicans in New Hampshire. So then, of course, it could mean that the most estimates are that the margin could come down really closer compared to what happened in Iowa, where the difference is really huge. Trump has received more than 50% of votes. But of course, the caucuses have a very different culture of open voting and voice voting. And I think very often the contrast is much more in such situations. In secret ballot votes, in case of primaries, voters are far more sort of objective and sort of clear about what they want to see. and they are less restrained in terms of visible pressure tactics of
Yes, and Professor,
powerful leaders.
also in the case of New Hampshire, even independent voters can, just
Yes.
ask for the ballot of either Republicans or Democrats. They don't have to be registered with the party to vote in this primary. So do you think they could also be an X factor here?
They could be definitely, as I mentioned earlier, that when you have seen surveys across party lines, including people who are sometimes not in any party, and they have kind of favored Nikki Haley. But then there are conspiracy theories also. Maybe Democrats are trying to create internal sort of disjunction between Trump and Nikki Haley and push Nikki Haley's case in that sense. But I think for your viewers, it is important to understand that there are two kinds of primaries that happens in US presidential elections. They're called open and closed primaries. And then there are quasi-open and quasi-closed primaries. Closed primaries are meant only for the registered voters of the party whose primary is taking place. And open primaries would mean that any voter who's registered as a voter could come and cast his vote in favor of a candidate. This is still within the party primaries in that sense. So there is a possibility that it is not clearly the most conservative state here, which is going to be clearly siding with one candidate. There is a space here where Nikki Haley could, and she's trying to do door-to-door campaign and handshakes and all that to see. And you mentioned of the initial very small example of a very small number of voters where she has really taken the lead. And that is the kind of enthusiasm that is seen in the camp of Nikki Haley. But so far, whatever is the larger trend, I think former President Donald Trump is really emerging as a very strong candidate.
Yes. Why do you think is that the case? Because is that because Donald Trump is being successfully able to paint Nikki Haley as one who's being funded secretly by Democrats, supported by Democrats? He's saying independent voters will come and vote in favor of her as well in this New Hampshire primary. Nikki Haley saying, nothing of that sort. I have a different agenda from Donald Trump and Biden. They're the two, really fossilized people in the race, and people don't really approve. She's saying majority of Americans don't want to see a Trump and Biden face-off.
Gautam, what you see is, I think, unusual in case of Trump's sort of followers, is that they are not really very often open to arguments in that sense. They kind of really believe in what he says, and he's also often very rhetorical and very often very blunt about things that he talks about other candidates and things that are happening to him. He is still in denial of 2020 elections. Even now he doesn't believe that he actually lost in 2020 elections, and there is a segment of his followers who actually trust him on that. So I think he has a basic, certain percentage of voters who are really followers of whatever he says, and that therefore he has to only work on expanding the margins to other voters who are likely to sort of go either in terms of Nikki Haley way or sort of just not be very enthusiastic to come and participate in these primaries in that sense. So he's focusing on that. And Nikki Haley, of course, is underlining the age and experience that she has, and she's a woman candidate and has her own followings in that sense. She has different views on several issues in that sense. But as of now, the only estimates that are being made in various projections is a very strong likelihood of Nikki Haley sort of coming closer and reducing the margin that we saw in the caucuses in Iowa. And that would mean that the race for GOP nomination will continue strongly in coming months till, June.
Yes, let's see what happens because right now the information is that there are polls saying that Trump is even ahead of Nikki Haley in South Carolina, where she's been governor and she's been focusing all her attention there. That primary is going to happen towards the end of next month, so there will be some breathing time, breathing space between what's happening in New Hampshire and what will happen next in South Carolina. So let's see what kind of a call does Nikki Haley take depending on the outcome of New Hampshire, which we'll start getting to know towards the morning where India time is concerned, and soon after the polls close, I guess some trends will start coming in. Thank you for joining us till then, Professor Swaran Singh.